And let's bring in the panel to discuss all of that. Republican consultant Marcus Dellartino and Democrat Matt Grotsky. Thanks for being here. Always just a jam-packed week. Let's start with that shocking and that really disturbing and saddening news that we heard about from Cesar Chavez. It was the result of allegations that he raped and abused children and women. This was the result of an investigation in the New York Times. We haven't independently verified it. It was a 5-year investigation by the New York Times. Governors came out almost immediately, just said we're not observing Cesar Chavez Day, which was supposed to happen on his birthday, which was March 31st. Talk to us a little bit about the fallout from this at the Capitol.
I don't think I've ever seen the Democratic Party and the unions move so fast in my entire life. I mean, it was statement after statement within an hour of talking about buildings we're taking the names of, you know, the holiday itself. I mean, it was somewhat amazing. You know, there is a little bit of a fallout at the Capitol as Republicans are putting together a measure to sort of do exactly what we're talking about, which is taking the name off and renaming the holiday, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll be seeing a little bit about that. But I don't, you know, it was a 5-year investigation. I don't think this is a one-day story. I think we're going to continue to hear about this in the days and months that follow.
And let me get your reaction to this, how the governor handled this, and how should everybody be dealing with this moving forward. I mean, it is a lot to talk about, because you start talking about, you know, civil rights leaders, labor leaders. I mean, he is high up there, at least was, like in the pantheon, up there with some of the biggest names in American history.
Yeah, well, I think Democrats have been consistent. It doesn't matter who you are. If you abuse women, if you abuse children, you know, we're not going to stand for that, right? So I think it's right that there's been this movement to remove his name from buildings, to obviously not recognize the holiday that we normally do. I do think that as upset as people are about this, we currently have a president that is known for abusing women, potentially children, with all the Epstein files that's going on there. So I'd like us to be a bit more consistent as a society in condemning that as well.
Yeah. Care to respond to what Matt's saying about that?
I would say that the courts have a different opinion, but I understand where he's going with this.
They're not in studio with us, though.
I think the you know, I think that's part of the reason that Democrats wanted to move so quick is because of the Epstein discussions that are currently happening. Democrats are certainly trying to use that to their advantage, and that's the reason that they had to put down the pedal quick to address the Chavez situation.
Yeah, and then there's kind of, like, you start getting into this. I mean, you got to remember some of the logistics of this. They're talking about changing street names and stuff like that. You work at local government. That's an all-encompassing process.
Yeah, it's going to be his name's in a lot of places. Yeah. I'm going to tell you that. I also think at some point we need to maybe we should just start using normal names and get away from naming things after politicians. But you know, just a little Marcus moment.
Dellartino Boulevard.
No, thank you.
And should this give pause? I mean, you know, currently there's efforts to name things after, you know, people now at the legislature. Should this give pause when we start thinking about how we want to honor people?
I think it's right to maybe take a beat on some of these things. I mean, you know, people are humans, and no human is perfect. But I mean, you gotta take a whole person into account when you think about naming something after them, and remember that some things might come out years later, right? So I think it's right to maybe be a little bit more cautious on that front with things like this.
Yeah, it's just not going to stop anything at the legislature. They want to name they want to name a memorial right now, or clear the way for a memorial for Charlie Kirk and Don Bowles. There's also efforts there to rename the Loop 202 after Charlie Kirk. This isn't going to give anybody a pause on that, right?
I don't believe so. I think that is full speed ahead, as far as I understand.
Okay, let's switch gears here now. Let's talk a little bit about some politics here in Arizona. I want to get your take. Andy Biggs, there was some audio tape we got a hold of. He was addressing a crowd out in the Far East Valley, and somebody had asked him about how his opponent, David Schweikert, was going after him for associating himself with white supremacists and anti-Semites. And in defending himself, Andy Biggs started quoting Confederate General Robert E. Lee. Want to get your reaction?
Well, yeah, to defend yourself against accusations of white supremacism by using a white supremacist as your example, it's a bold move, Cotton. We'll see if it works out for him. But I think it's hilarious from our perspective as Democrats, because it's just a gaffe that we can utilize, right? But it's a little bit like being accused of being a terrorist and then saying, like, well, I'm not a terrorist, and, you know, I go back to bin Laden and try to think about how he dealt with criticism. So, again, not the best move on his part, but we'll take it. Keep them coming, Biggs.
And just a gaffe, or is this more than a gaffe?
I don't think we'll be talking about this next week. I mean, I don't think the campaign does not pivot on this exact moment. Do I wish he would have picked maybe, I don't know, Lincoln or something? Sure. But frankly, I don't think that this is not going to be the moment. What's going on here, though, is something that we have talked about previously, and Republicans need to be cautious of this, is beating the tar out of each other in a primary. And David Schweikert's time after time shown he's an aggressive campaigner, but tearing down each other in the primary is not beneficial going into a general election. And if you need proof, ask Governor Napolitano how it went.
I think there's going to be some amazing ads in the Republican primary and then potentially in the general if Biggs is the nominee. So looking forward to that.
All right, we're going to take a quick break right now. But when we come back, the attack on Iran sends gas prices soaring. Bring the panel back in. Thanks for sticking around. Let's start with you right here. Gas prices soaring in Arizona. Arizona, one of the worst hit states in the nation. We've seen, we're one of 3 states that have seen the price of gas per gallon jump by over $1 over the past month. The political question is what kind of fallout does this mean for the party in power right now come fall?
I think it's huge fallout. I think even if the situation were to get remedied tomorrow, right, there's still going to be months of lag time for the economy to recover from this, right? And again, we were talking about ads in the previous segment. You know, Democrats are going to be reminding folks of this hardship, even if it's, 6 or 8 months from now, right? But this is a president that ran on lowering gas prices. He ran on no more dumb wars, right? And what are we doing? Gas prices are high, and we're in a war in Iran, and no one can really tell us what the exit strategy is or what the strategy is in general. So I think voters, particularly independents, are going to be thinking long and hard about that the closer we get to November.
Is there any way that you see the president can get out of this mess right now?
Well, I want to go back to one of the things you said, which is this affects Arizona, the most. And one of those things that has to do with that is our special formulation that we've been fighting over for, it feels like, my lifetime. And that's a special gas you have to buy in Maricopa County. And at some point, I'd like to address that issue. I don't know how, but there's got to be some smart scientist somewhere that can come up with a gas formula that works for Phoenix that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. Yeah. 1, 2, I do think at some point, the supply chain is going to get figured out here, and it's either going to be a naval escort or a pipeline or some other way that, because it's going to become at some point unsustainable.
Yeah, and there's not really much the governor or the legislature can do here on the local level, right? I mean, you start talking about gasoline taxes, not much. The seasonal blend doesn't save that much. I think it's a guy from AAA told me it was an extra 10 cents a gallon. So you're kind of your hands are tied here on the local level.
Well,
too, right?
not really. It really goes to the EPA. So the state's hands are somewhat tied. You're going to have to go fight with the EPA over the formulation. But I do think it's worth somebody asking some questions of the oil companies to make sure we're not getting gouged, that they're using this moment as an excuse to gouge gas buyers.
It's all in the president's control, though. This is a situation he created, right? It's on his watch, and I think that's what we need to remind people of between now and the fall.
And, there's still people are still pressing to get real answers as to why he went to war with Iran at this point and whatnot. I mean, if you're counseling Republican candidates this year heading into the midterms, what are you telling them about how to deal and handle gas prices?
Drill, baby, drill. I do think it points out the fact of how reliant we are on foreign sources of oil and how much we've got to be more dependent on our own resources to fund this. But it's a tough place to be, and I'll tell you why, is because it folds into this affordability issue. Beef prices are at an all-time high. You go into the supermarket, it's a little painful. We've got to talk, you got to pivot and start talking about immigration's been solved and some of the other good stories you could possibly tell to pivot off that message.
It sounded like you wanted to weigh in on this.
I was just going to say they're only drilling themselves right now, right? So they can try to pivot all they want, but it's a pocketbook issue at the end of the day, and folks are going to be remembering that costs are out of control, and it's this president's fault. So drill, baby, drill.
All right, and sticking with politics and campaign politics, I wanted to get your take on Kai Newkirk running and challenging Greg Greg Stanton from the left out in that East Valley district.
Yeah, that district's not a shoo-in by any means. Greg Stanton is incredibly popular. It's anybody's right to run in a primary. I just don't think now is the time, and it's certainly not the most helpful thing when we need to be focused on beating Republicans at the end of the day.
I've never heard anybody say Greg Stanton's not liberal enough.
Yeah.
So that was sort of interesting. Arizona natives are going to struggle a little bit because he came from California. And so, you know, Arizonans are increasingly sort of grappling with that issue. You know, at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a very tough road to run against former Mayor of Phoenix.
Agreed. Yeah, in any case, if he was able to win, do you think that would open up that seat to a possible Republican victory?
I think the risks are substantial, yes. I mean, this is a swing state. It's traditionally been held by Republicans. Again, the district is not a Democratic shoo-in by any means. I think that's a real risk, and that's what folks are looking at. So.
And I think voters know the last thing Congress needs is another activist. They need thoughtful policymakers, and they're going to notice the difference. And I think it could, frankly, open it up to a Republican win.
Okay, and let's wrap talk about this. Attorney General Chris Mays has filed criminal charges against betting market Kalshi, saying that they're running an illegal, gambling operation and election sports wagering operations. Want to get your take on that?
I think it's fascinating. I mean, I've had that question for quite some time, and so she's helping me answer it. And that is, you know, there's tons of laws on the books dealing with sports betting, dealing with tribal gaming. All these things are very highly regulated within Arizona. And so for an app to show up and say, send me some money so you can make a bet, it didn't translate to me. It didn't make sense. And I think, you know, my gut instinct's coming true here.
Yeah, and as a political consultant, a guy that's in the game, how has these betting markets affected how politics is played these days?
Well, I think the broader situation is you can't bet on elections, right? And
sure.
I think in an atmosphere where there's so many conspiracy theories running around and people are always looking for, you know, who's the most corrupt individual, I think even having that as part of the conversation or a concern is a legitimate thing for all voters. So I think she's on the right track by raising this issue. If I were a betting man, it looks to me like they did something wrong there. So
no pun intended there if you were a betting man.
None at all.
There you go. But it's also interesting that a lot of people are starting to rely on these betting markets to see what happens in these campaigns, maybe even more so than polls, correct?
Oh, well, I mean, the general public might. I would tell you it's probably not your best course of action.
No, not a good idea.
You know, polls it's a scientific tool, and a lot of work goes into it. I'm gonna rely on my polls.
All right, we're going to have to end it right there. That's all the time we have. Be sure to join us next week for more politics.